Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you could join me today. My name is Patty Simonton. I'm the director of the Be Green business program at Bethesda Green. I'd also like to introduce Caroline Davenport, our summer impact intern, who'll be keeping an eye on the chat to make sure we don't miss anything. The session is titled Nurturing Sustainability-Focused Companies in a Post-Pandemic World. During our conversation, we'll discuss some of the business priorities facing early stage companies as communities begin to rebuild from the economic and social destruction of the coronavirus pandemic, and share ideas for how entrepreneurial programs can adapt to help founders better prepare for the changing landscape. To help us get a sense of who's in the room, do you guys just want to briefly introduce yourselves since it is a small group? Go ahead, Ian, why don't you kick us off?
My name is Ian Fisk. I'm the executive director of the Mentor Capital Network. We're a pool of about 1,200 folks around the world who have built, managed, or invested in for-profit social enterprises, and we connect to entrepreneurs starting and growing the same as mentors and advisors. And
the founders that you work with are global. So even though you
Yes.
personally are based in the United States, the founders and the beneficiaries of their companies are also global.
Yeah, and about a third of our mentors are outside of the US and about 2/3 of our companies are outside of the US. We're doing our best to balance that number. We try our best to focus on communities where you don't have easy access to resources. So unless we have an excellent local partner, like we often do in the Washington, D.C. area in Bethesda Green, we generally avoid places like San Francisco and Boston, where I am now, and New York, because if you're in San Francisco and you can't find the resources, that's less our problem than yours. But if you're in Oklahoma or Guyana or Kyrgyzstan, then we do our best to connect folks there.
Awesome. And Amy, you are fairly close to San Francisco, is that right?
I am. I'm just across the bay, so I can see it out of my window right over here. So my name is Amy Meadows, and I'm with Impact Circles Cooperative. We're in the ideation phase of building an accelerator for intersectional women as a co-op.
Fantastic. Caroline, you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, everyone. I'm Caroline. I have been Patty's intern this whole summer. It's actually my last week. I'm preparing to go back to school shortly to start my final semester at the University of Maryland, where I study public policy, and I'm also minoring in sustainability and in Spanish. And so, yeah, if you want to know anything more about me, just let me know, but I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
I'm glad you can join us, Caroline. Adam, do you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Adam Roberts. I'm the executive director of Bethesda Green, and happy to hear from you all this evening.
And Adam comes with a very long experienced profession of animal conservation, traveling around the world. And so I bring this up mostly, Adam, because the perspectives of the people in the room, I think, is going to be really important for our conversation as we go. So I think it can be useful there. And Colin, I'm not sure how long you'll be able to join us, but if you would like to say hi and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Colin Eddy. I am the events assistant with the conveners team, mostly here as a support for you guys for anything that you need. But, I do come from a bit of a different world than most of you. My area is more event logistics, but I'm really enjoying this week kind of getting to learn a lot more about what you guys do, seeing how passionate everybody is about what you guys are working towards. So it's been very interesting for me. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for saving all the technical glitches earlier today. So I appreciate hearing about the, where you guys are coming from, what you're working on. We'll kind of dive back into that a little bit later on. I just want to kind of briefly introduce Bethesda Green for purposes of the folks here. Located just outside of Washington, D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland, we work to address environmental challenges by creating a sustainable green community built collaboratively through citizen engagement, environmental education, government partnership, and innovative business development. We organize our work under two primary programs, which we call our Be Green Business and our Be Green Living programs. Bethesda Green's Be Green Living program works to elevate community engagement and enhance the quality of life for Bethesda area residents. Our community projects include efforts to improve stormwater management, promote street-level community recycling, and improve access to green space, clean energy, and transportation. Our Environmental Leaders program supports environmental education for high school seniors, cultivating the next generation of visionary green leaders. Under our Be Green business program, we support leaders who are building for-profit business models around innovative and sustainable solutions to tackle environmental and social challenges. Through our B Corp program, we advise existing local businesses through the process of B Corp certification and help them discover and implement best practices for sound governance, support for workers, and sustainability. And finally, through our Innovation Lab, we support companies developing impactful business models with a focus in the area of environmental sustainability and sustainable food systems through 4 distinct programs. These programs enable us to provide relevant and timely support to companies from idea stage through seed and Series A. Our member companies are overwhelmingly located in the DC, Maryland, Virginia region of the US, though their business models, like those many of growing companies, rely on a very interconnected global economy. So it's from this lens that I wanted to host this conversation. All right. So in my role, I have the honor of working very closely with all our portfolio members, and I've heard firsthand about the challenges and opportunities that they face as the world adjusts to our new reality. One thing that comes across loud and clear is that business as usual, that perhaps often includes business models designed around extractive and linear supply chains, cheap labor, and high-stress work environments, is being challenged by small, nimble, yet increasingly impactful companies who are looking to flip the status quo on its head. The US Economic Development Agency defines resilience, at least in terms of economic development, as the ability of a community or region to anticipate, withstand, and bounce back from various disruptions to its economic base. Companies and their founders that have demonstrated resilience have weathered much of the storm, and some have even thrived. Still, others continue to struggle. Just yesterday, a founder asked her fellow entrepreneurs at a CEO roundtable discussion how, after reading the United Nations 2021 report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, how everyone doesn't just throw in the towel and call it quits. We're definitely not out of the woods yet. The title I chose for this session, considering a post-pandemic world, may be a bit too optimistic for where we find ourselves today. Though it is that inkling of hope that the future will be brighter that helps me get out of bed each morning and do the work that I do. After all, the founders that I work with and that many of us work with are building companies that we hope will make the world brighter. So with all that said, I'd like to use this time to discuss ways that we can best support our founders and their companies with the support they need today to help them prepare for the world they're collectively building. So this is designed to be a very interactive conversation. I imagine that will be easy with this group. So let's just kind of jump in, shall we? All right, I have a poll, so I'm going to go ahead and launch that. All right, we'll just take just a couple of seconds here. What I'm looking for is a sense from you about the state of mind of the founders that you're working with today. I know there's all of 2 of you who'll be filling this out, so this will be perfect to kind of have, but Colin, I'd love your input too. And Adam, actually from where you're sitting as well, what do you see happening with the founders in our program? Great. You guys say you're mostly done? Kind of, sort of? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end this poll and I'm gonna share the results. So it looks like we do have some confidence, which is great. A couple of wary folks, exhausted folks. The term languishing was new to me. I don't know if you guys caught that New York Times article that talked about that. I wanted to include that because I feel like that's sometimes where I find myself. Money, yeah, personal health concerns, political. Great. Thank you.
My answers are a lot on having most of my founders are outside of the US.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the US founders are less concerned than the ones in India are terrified.
Absolutely. Yep.
And
that's, and I think getting a sense of where everyone is, I think, that's such an important element.
Ones
right?
in Myanmar have literally dropped off the map and I can't find them and I hope they're still alive.
That's really scary. The programs that you have, do you specifically have curriculum, or do you plan to have curriculum that addresses the mental welfare of the founders in your program? Amy, would you like to just briefly describe sort of what you have in mind?
Yeah, so I mean, we don't have it built out yet as we're still at the ideation phase, but we are looking at, models where we can help people kind of understand their privilege a little bit and know, when to give other people a seat at the table, when to step back and let others speak. I know that's not really the like sustainability environmental focus, but that is one of the things that we're kind of looking at.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate hearing that, because it's all, I mean, the sustainability is one side of it, right? If the founders themselves are feeling, exhausted, then there's not going to be much, excitement to actually move forward. So even if they have a sustainable idea, why do it, if they're feeling like they're kind of just pressed down?
Yeah.
What are some other thoughts that you've seen, or other, programs? I've seen, the newsletter through the Global Accelerator Network. They'll send things out around meditation and, trying to help founders, kind of balance life a little bit better. And I'll occasionally throw articles that way to the founders in our group. But I haven't yet incorporated programs specifically around mental health and well-being of the founders. And so I'm interested in kind of, have you heard of programs that you find really compelling and interesting that you would recommend?
I don't know that I've found any that I really love and gravitate towards. I found a lot of, so in 20 years of experience in the corporate world, academic world, nonprofit, and hospitals, I've seen a lot of what doesn't work. So I know, I know what I do want to be doing. And one of the things I want to be doing that I think will help support everyone's mental health in the organization is really like a cooperative one vote for each person kind of model, so that it helps to kind of balance out some of those hierarchies and structures, allowing everyone to better understand what the other people are doing, and then just really incorporating a model of rest and rejuvenation into our models as we go forward, because humans are far too overtaxed, as Ian was saying earlier. They're overwhelmed, they're overtaxed, and we really need to figure out how to do this better.
Yeah, absolutely. Caroline, you and I spoke a little earlier about this topic. I was wondering if you'd be open to sharing some of the thoughts that we discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. Patty and I were, brainstorming ideas about how this conversation might go, what kind of answers people might have, and just based off of our own two experiences in the past, however many months it's been in this pandemic, I can't keep track at this point. What are some of the concerns founders might have? And I think, as the title of this session was in a post-pandemic world, that's what we were expecting to be at when we titled the session. And now we're here, and that's not the case. And so this expectation of, where we're supposed to be versus where we are actually at, and all the uncertainty that founders, all of us, but them in particular, as they try to plan for their businesses, are facing, because there's just like no guarantees, and it's been a lot of ups and downs and back and forth, like just when you think we're getting out of it, we're not, and so we were anticipating that people might come back to us with responses that founders are really unsure of what they need at this time and what to ask for, because they're not sure what kind of future they're planning for. And then also that, at least here in the US, that like their customers might kind of be diverging in two different directions. People who are, for whatever reason, still on the more cautious side because maybe they're immunocompromised or they're elderly or they have kids who can't get vaccinated or whatever the reason may be. And then you have other people who are, ready to just like go full force back into the economy as both consumers and workers. They don't want to wear masks in the workplace anymore or in stores that they patronize, et cetera. So how do they, keep up with the demands of a consumer base who's basically moving in two opposite directions? So I can't even imagine how difficult it must be for founders to balance all of that, while maintaining their own well-being and safety and that of their employees. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
So I can actually build a little bit about what Amy said.
Yeah, please.
So one of the key components of our program in matching mentors isn't the right technical knowledge. It's finding people who will communicate mentor to mentee in a way that works for both people, that keeps them both engaged and both respected. So we focus more, we have a subset of very knowledgeable people, we hope, we think, but most of our active work, well, he says so that people are in that subset on this call, but most of our active work is making sure that the fit is where both sides choose each other because they both think they're going to add value to each other. We run, as I think at this point everybody except Adam on this call has heard me say, we run a dating service. We're getting adults who are not getting paid to want to spend time together. And in terms of, because I came out of Wall Street consulting and watching very smart assholes try and tell people things just wasn't going to work in this world, right? Or very smart, let's call it very number smart. We'll leave it at that, right? Because there's also, and we're not good at measuring the emotional quotient, which is the relevant thing here, but we can give the two sides the opportunity to choose each other, which if you're looking for somebody for advice, the fact that they will respect you and listen to you is a choice you're going to make. Yes, we can all be trained to do this and that will modify it some, but the natural fit and giving the folks the chance to choose each other, I think is a part of, for folks who are overwhelmed, we want to make sure that they can turn to somebody with trust. Business moves at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
And how do you build that trust, particularly in a time where people are dying around you or where everything is happening, is incredibly important. And our small piece of that is giving people the chance to figure out if they're going to trust each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that, and it's interesting. While you were speaking, made me think about how the recruitment process for the Innovation Lab, there's some really kind of down to earth conversations that I have with the founders about our program, about what they can expect, from me, from the others in the group, and just, really setting expectations about both, what's involved and kind of how we expect them to engage with each other as well, and sort of saying like, this is a community, we're growing a community here. And we'd like to, if invited, we'd like to welcome you to join this community. And, there's, you mentioned, because we're already swearing on this recording, but, you mentioned there are a couple of groups that have like a no asshole rule. And, it's not a bad rule, right? If you're going to do it, right? If you're going to try and, build companies, especially ones focused on impact, be it, social, environmental, like you're going to want to work with each other. So, yeah. So maybe unintentional policies to support the mental well-being of our founders can just be like, establishing great transparent expectations and trust within the community, just holding everyone up. So I appreciate that. Cool. So let's kind of move the conversation a little bit to changing business priorities for the founders and investors. So away from kind of the well-being of the founders themselves. What are you hearing either from your founders or from founders on the street, as you cross the street? Well, you may find some, Amy, closer to where you are, but as you walk by founders on the street, about the changing priorities that they have of their business models, if anything. And then really, what are your thoughts about some of the factors behind this change? And I guess I'll throw out one example that I'm hearing that founders are increasingly aware of the importance of prioritizing diversity on their teams, and they sort of recognize why they should do it. And I think about maybe what prompted that, right? Obviously the momentum from the Black Lives Matter movement. I think people are educating themselves about the value of diversity on their teams. And I am a little cynical that perhaps because a lot of impact investors are pushing diversity and inclusion and equity as well, that like they kind of recognize, they're like, hey, I got to get some diversity on my team to help make this, to help be eligible to apply to funding from XYZ. So I want to throw that to you guys. What are you hearing and seeing in your world?
So I'm part of a mentoring group, and one of the things that I'm seeing in that group with those founders is a real call since COVID for rest and rejuvenation, for not maintaining this, burnout model, of creating a startup. Yes, we want to move quickly. Yes, we want to get our work done. Yes, we all want to make money. Like that's part of how we pay our rent, but a real call to being more truly balanced and having, not being in that survival mode, but being in a thriving mode is one of the things that I'm seeing in my groups.
Definitely. Thank you. I appreciate that.
How about you, Ian?
Supply chain and relationships. So in context of COVID, and also the Suez thing and other things that are happening around the world, the assumption that you can get what you need to produce the thing that you produce is, 2-3 years ago, people were like, we'll find it somewhere. Now, we can't get, they're not giving us the right price, we'll get it somewhere else. Now they're like, we might not be able to get it into the country. We might not be able, like, suppliers are a much bigger relationship because they're no longer a commodity. I mean, some suppliers were never a commodity, but other suppliers were. And the number of suppliers that are treated as commodities, not that you should ever treat your suppliers as commodities, but it happened. Right, Ford needs iron ore, or GM needs iron ore, they're gonna get it from a bunch of places. All right, fine, that's still a commodity, but you move down the chain, and I'm seeing a lot of the apparel companies, like where are they getting their warp and their weave and their fabric? They have to be really, really careful about that, because either for logistical reasons or COVID reasons or whatever, they need to know where their supplies are coming from, and it's way more tenuous. And so they're building stronger relationships. I mean, this has always been one of the things some of our more successful companies have been able to do. We worked many years with years ago with a company that produced a guayusa energy drink out of Ecuador called Luna. They're still around, they got bought, so they're not running it anymore. But their strength was they were really, really good with the farmers. And then when another company that was 10 times their size came in to try and buy the product, the farmer's like, no, these guys actually treat us with respect. So you got to buy from them. So they ended up actually making a bunch of money as wholesalers to their competition. Yeah, like Dan and Tyler were like selling the stash. And I'm pretty sure that's what got them through their early years, because they'd made a point of building the strong relationships. And that was the exception story back then. Now, everybody who is crossing borders with any kind of product that I talk to is trying to figure something like that out, because there is no given that you're going to be, even within a country, that you're going to be able to get the things you need if you're in a product business. And so building those human relationships that strengthen, so that you can know that you can call the people and they'll say, okay, we'll make sure that we don't we don't have as much as everybody needs, but because you've actually taken the time to build the relationship, we'll put you further up on the list than you would have been otherwise, or whatever. That is probably a big COVID thing, pandemic thing that I've seen. You can't take your supplies for granted, with the exception of, and some of these, there's some great examples in the Bethesda Green programs of the hyperlocal folks, right? Literally, we've got our own farm, so we're just going to supply ourselves, right?
Yeah.
But there's, only so far you can go if you've got your own farm and you only have one.
Yeah.
But you've got some great stories, examples of people who have their own supply chains. And
Mhm.
that's been very beneficial.
Yeah, and you can sort of hear rumblings or very loud rumblings about kind of the importance of making those local supply chains more resilient, kind of being prepared for any of the changes that can come. And climate risk is definitely a thing. We'll jump into that and maybe able to pivot sooner on that. I want to just draw your attention, since you brought up supply chains, as a shameless plug about. We are currently hosting a speaker series that I'll put the link in. And what made me think about it is, a lot of the sessions are actually talking about resiliency in supply chains. But Ian, your point about the relationships with supply chain really tracks with a conversation that we had prep for one of the calls with a supply chain optimization manager from Tata Consumer Products. And he really brought that up. He's like, if you're gonna, you want to diversify your supply chain, you want to have redundancy wherever you can, and you can either take the approach of going wide, and just hoping that you can find, substitutes wherever necessary. But if you have those relationships and you can, they trust you, they respect you, they know that you're going to be there for them if it's needed, they're going to probably go out of their way to support you more than they would some other random client, and that's, I don't think that should be underappreciated at all. So thank you for bringing that up. Caroline, since you've been on the calls and hearing about from the founders and stuff too, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think the supply chain one has been key, just in a lot of our conversations, preparing for and then actually conducting the summer speaker series sessions, the changing considerations involved with that due to COVID and then incidents like the Suez Canal backup. So I don't think I have anything to say that is not repeating what's been said, but.
Great. How do we see our founders, or in general, kind of adjusting their strategies for this? I mean, are they making stronger relationships? Are they, or I guess in general, going back a little bit, like prioritizing something like environmental sustainability? Like what I'm seeing, are more instances of kind of zero waste life cycles for their products. They're sort of taking into consideration the type of packaging and manufacturing and just, the whole value chain in the design of what they're building. We have one company that specifically chose to sell their drinks in aluminum cans instead of plastic or glass because he knew that could be recycled. And really just the decisions. I mean, there's countless stories of, you have to make the decisions that still enable you to stay in business. So you can only do so much at this stage, especially if you're working with very early stage companies. And so if you're able to sort of prioritize the elements of and really incorporating sustainability at a very early stage, there are costs and benefits associated with doing that. But if it allows you to kind of do it while still making money, and moving your business forward, I mean, obviously I work in a program that prioritizes environmental sustainability. So all of the companies in my group are going to do this. We sort of, twist their arm a little bit to ensure it happens. But what we are seeing though, is that stakeholders want it, the investors want it more, consumers want it more. There's an increasing awareness just in society about different certifications and what do they mean, and people are doing some research. We've got ideas in companies floating around about people trying to buy products based on causes that they support, or B Corp certification, of course, and others. So it's and I'm sure people have been reading the stories, like people are changing their buying habits, right? They're taking more time, they're shopping online, they can do more research. You're not walking into Walmart and buying the first thing that you see. So yeah, it's interesting to kind of to hear that. On the topic of environmental sustainability and climate risk management, I'm interested in your take on this. I mentioned the zero waste supply chain. Are there other things that you all are seeing in the founders that you're working with where they are incorporating these principles into their value chains as a whole? And this may not be the,
that they weren't already.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
But I
but
mean,
they're
by
trying to improve.
definition, for I think everybody on this call, we're looking for folks who are already doing that
Mm-hmm.
to a certain extent. Like, actually, no, not by definition for Amy, although by probably very strong correlation. Does that feel like a more accurate statement? I know by definition for me and for Bethesda Green,
Mm-hmm.
and for you, it feels like it's not a given, but a strong correlation, right? That's the kind of people we're looking for in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's not that it's different now than it was 2 years ago, right?
Do you think there's more of a push to communicate that companies are using those principles or prioritizing those than there was before?
Outside of in India and Pakistan, I'm seeing a lot of it. I can't speak to the whole world. I try and, like, places where I've talked to at least 5 or 10 people about this. I haven't seen any of the recent, I call this the 80-20 split. You ask a whole bunch of people of certain age or whatever, like, do you pay more for a green product? Do you look for green products? Somewhere between 60 and 80% people say they do, but then you go and you put identical products and you put a more environmentally sustainable version of a product and you price it at 5% more, and less than 20% actually make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see the newest version of the second study. I don't care about the first study. I don't care how many people say it's interesting, because until 2018, we actually tested it, the number was around 20. Natural Marketing Institute does this. So, and you, Patty, I know you've seen me scoff at people who tried to use that in their business plan that everybody says they will. Well, that's nice. Everybody else wants rainbows. How many people are actually doing it? Now you have an equivalent product at the same price, then you have a benefit, and you absolutely get a benefit in the quality of people you can hire.
Yeah.
So when you live your values financially, you get higher quality people for lower salaries, which is a weird thing to say because we don't necessarily want lower salaries, but for white collar jobs where you can flex around the edges, fine. But in terms of, are they communicating it more? In the US, I think we hit saturation. I don't see that the companies are communicating it like they're not doing more because they were already trying to do it. And I can't speak to the whole world. The one area where I've seen people talk about it more is sort of South Asia's India, Pakistan, because that's become a thing. And I suspect we looked at different regions of the world, we'd see different places where it was starting to hit media awareness. Like, I don't think in Western Europe it's advanced because it's always been a thing.
Yeah.
And I think we hit saturation a couple of years ago in the US, again, in our little bubble of companies that are actively trying to do it. I'm actively interested in the folks who figured out how way to do things that save them money, because then other people will copy it. Right? Like, if you do it and you make money, no, as our friend Seth says, no margin, no mission, right?
Yep.
So you have to do it in a way that does that. So I haven't seen an increase, but that's because I'm looking at a narrow subset of people, probably because I'm looking at a set of people who are, there's no marginal value add from what they were doing before.
We had a recent, one of the recent sessions, talked about how we had a bunch of B Corp specialists kind of on board and talking about certification as a whole. And one of the things they were talking about was how, B Corp, there's definitely value to being a B Corp. And Ian, you touched on it in terms of being able to attract a workforce that, is aligned with your mission, that is willing to kind of do the work, perhaps at a lower, salary than they might otherwise get. Although hopefully that will eventually change, and the transparency and the governance that comes with, having that kind of certification. But, as reporting systems become more mature and companies are able to kind of have their environmental impact, their footprint tracked and verified by these outside entities, to kind of be able to say, like, this is what I'm doing, like, this is our supply chain, this is how we're treating our workers, that the certification isn't necessarily required for it, which can maybe perhaps lead to some confusion then, because consumers, won't necessarily know what that means, right? Like, what is it like if I'm a company that's not certified and I'm saying, hey guys, I'm doing all this cool stuff, the consumers are gonna be like, are you? Like, are you really? So yeah.
Clarity in the, what certifications matter. USD organic means a thing, means a very specific thing.
Yeah. Yep.
On
Exactly.
to sort of circle a little bit back to the to reference what some of the work that I think, I don't want to make too many assumptions, but I think Amy is doing is working with people who think of you as a whole person. Right? Like, when even if it's not about gender or self-identity, if it's just about, like, the environment is very important to me, I want to go work for a company where they understand part of my internal self and not just my external value. Some version of that statement feels, Amy, like it overlaps with what you're trying to create. Again, your story, not mine. But watch the white man walk himself backwards over a cliff. Patty's seen me do it before. And so, like, that I think has always been valuable. I think the certification piece is absolutely correct. But who have you seen? Like, you're more in that play in the US, the two of you, who have any of you, all four of you who aren't me on this call, who have you seen other than B, who's been moving the certification to a point where mass market consumers would understand what it is and what it means? So other than fair trade, other than B, other than organic, what's out there that if I walk into a Walmart or a Safeway or a Star Market or whatever, sorry,
In Boston.
well, there's one right out the window there. What is not me, not professional social entrepreneur, going to recognize and know? Because that's what's gonna, I feel like the path that you're looking for, Patty, that's what we're gonna need.
Yeah.
And how do we get the folks who are not in our bubble?
Right.
You're more in touch with that. Like, what's
well, and Amy, I saw your hand up earlier, so I want to just make sure that did you want to build on that, or do you want to kind of stay on the certification conversation, because we can come back to it?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, like, a lot of what I was seeing pre-COVID was honestly, it felt like a lot of whitewashing, for lack of a better term. It felt like, oh, we're going to say that we do these things, but then there's no real action. I once did a project where I was looking at all of the different sustainability methods for airlines and who was actually doing them, whether it was, trying to treat their own wastewater or have electric ground vehicles or use little winglets that help with lift, so they use less gasoline or less fuel, whatever. So a lot of it has felt very, over the years, has felt very much like a facade. But now, over the last few recent years, with Greta Thunberg and with, all of the increase in fires, the increase in hurricanes, the increase in these heat domes, in Australia up here, that are happening everywhere. I'm really hoping to see a shift in truly moving the needle, rather than just being like, I painted my parking lot white so it doesn't absorb the heat.
Right.
Good job. I'm glad that you picked up trash for an hour. Cool. Okay. What are we doing to, like, really keep the needle pushed and moving?
Right.
some of those things? If you get a city to paint its parking lots white, then you've actually made a difference, right? Like your own parking space, whatever. If we get political action in the city of San Francisco, or even better, Atlanta, or some places with big open space, then you know that's where politics comes into some of this, is getting larger areas and larger influences to actually matter, because then that makes
Absolutely.
the dent we can make.
So in the chat, you'll see, and Caroline, thank you for sharing this. This is a document that some of our interns this summer pulled together of a list of different green business certifications. So Ian, to specifically answer your question about that, like some of the ones that are either up and coming or addressing specific industries. You know, Montgomery County here in Maryland has its own green business certification, and you know, considerations come into play around you know, cost, the number of things that are tracked. Do they have to be validated by an outside organization? You know, how many employees do you have? Do you know, doesn't matter, that kind of thing. So that list can certainly be worth, you know, kind of scrolling over. The conversation that we had on certifications really kind of dove into that, because there's the broader impact side of things and the certifications that can kind of just, the process of the B Corp, the certification of the B Corp is almost not as important as the steps needed to get there, and all of the kind of elements, because it raises awareness and you know, to kind of bring us back to the topic here of just nurturing these companies for it. It's like helping them be more aware of the simple ways that they can actually do things better. And, you know, to your point, Amy, like push that needle internally, because they're, you know, they're going to be small and their impact is still going to be small. But, you know, what we're hearing in terms of trends and ways that companies can engage is that even as a small company, they can choose to work with suppliers who align with their mission. They can choose to kind of, and if they're performing well and they're living up to their values, they may also be attractive to larger companies who are doing the same thing, kind of saying, we want to work with mission aligned suppliers. So it's kind of neat to sort of see that happening bit by bit, be it B Corp or not. And, you know, investors are increasingly, the impact investors are increasingly saying, like, we want to see your ability to track these metrics and align and demonstrate, because they need to measure the impact of their own portfolios, align with their values too. So it's, I guess, you know, thinking this post-pandemic, I mean, obviously we're still very much in the pandemic, but the world that we're moving into is, you know, I think it's just extremely different. And I think that people are just more aware of things, and they're not willing to put up with a lot of shit anymore. I mean, they're just, you know, they're gonna make decisions that hopefully, right? I mean, you know, here I am in the DMV area, and there's still a lot of people kind of going back to normal, and so be it. But like, it's a sense of, maybe there's a greater sense of responsibility and that role that people have together. Caroline, do you want to add anything just on the topic of the certifications? Because you were such a big part, and she facilitated the session that we had on that. So I want to give her a chance to join this.
Yeah, I had the honor of facilitating the session. I learned a lot from it. And I actually said in the session how I had never heard of B Corp before I started this internship, which probably isn't a good sign, since sustainability is one of my minors and this is the field I want to go into. And I'm a member of Gen Z, and we're on the whole supposed to be more knowledgeable about this stuff. But I actually wanted to bring a little show and tell. You were talking about Runa earlier. I just bought these 2 of them. I had the first one this morning for the first time at Giant the other day. And on the back, you can see.
This is why you're still awake, by the way.
Yeah.
Careful with that.
Exactly. It was
Not yawning like I am.
It's
I
the
don't
Gen Z
blame you.
thing. She doesn't need as much sleep as we do. Go on.
All good. But it has 4 different certifications listed: fair trade, USDA organic, non-GMO, and then it has B Corp. But this is just a B, like, you know, it says certified B corporation. But, you know, I think most consumers, unfortunately, it's like still don't know what that means exactly. And it reminded me of a New York Times article I was reading yesterday or the day before about, it was like a New York Times Wirecutter collaboration on how to shop online more sustainably. And it was talking about a pilot project in some South American country where shoppers, when they were buying online, were given the option of like next day shipping or 2-day shipping, or, you know, whatever. And they had 2 test groups. One was would tell the consumer how many tons of carbon you would abate by choosing the later option. And then the other would tell the consumer how many trees they saved by choosing the later option. And way more people chose the later option when you put it in terms of something tangible like trees. Everyone can visualize that. And so I know this is just one can, and fortunately there's no packaging that comes along with it, which is definitely a plus because we don't want unnecessary packaging. But I think like for companies to be able to, effectively communicate their sustainability priorities to consumers, there has to be some sort of way to connect with people who aren't going to do the research and be like, what is this fourth symbol on the can, which is probably most people. So I just thought I would throw that out there because I really liked that article and I loved the session and I loved the energy drink. So those are some of the main thoughts I've had tumbling around in my brain since the session last week.
Thank you, Caroline. Thanks so much. There's just kind of recognizing kind of where we are at time. I mean, we've danced around a couple of things here. Like we've danced around the idea of kind of supporting the founder and kind of recognizing what these companies are doing and the changing kind of priorities. We haven't quite gotten to a topic that I do want to spend just a couple minutes on before the end here, which is workforce, right? I mean, here in the US, the media has really been talking about this persistent labor shortage. They're saying it's hindering the economic recovery. I'm interested to hear from you, just kind of your speculative ideas here of what might be causing that from where you're sitting, as all of you are in the United States at this point. But if you want to speak from a global perspective, I'm interested. Ian, go ahead.
So I will defer if folks have seen different data, but my assumption is people not wanting to go back to work in crowded situations. So if you can work from home, so people are saying it's the government subsidy. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's the amount of money it would take me to work in a public facing job like a restaurant or a supermarket is greater than it was 2 years ago, because the possible downside is no longer having to clean the fry machine, it's death.
Yeah.
And so because you see, on the interwebs and that series of tubes, says the Gen Xer, you see, it's always restaurants or factories that have a floor, not that aren't, big robot factories, but and people are placing a higher value on having to be in public. And it seems to me a pretty obvious reason why. All right, I haven't had a lot of public facing jobs in the past couple of decades, but if I had to go to work for a restaurant, I would want more money than 2 years ago.
Sure.
Also a restaurant that would be stupid enough to hire me, but that's a separate. So Patty, you've been a bartender many years ago, right? Yep. Would you go back to that if something unfortunate happened to Bethesda Green? And would there be a difference for you in whether or not you had to have a public facing job or not?
I loved bartending. I thought it was an awesome job. No. And I think no, not so much because of the money or the risk, but because I have a much lower tolerance of people as a whole these days when I got the ones that are drinking at bars late night. So, it's earlier versions of Patty has a higher patience.
Oh, so we'll shift to the person who is not yet bitter and cynical, we hope, and is still amped up on energy drinks. Caroline, you presumably have plenty of opportunities to work in places where you have to deal with crowds.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going into my last semester of college, and only taking 3 classes and TAing another one, but I still was like, oh, I want to, get a job and make some money, just, fill out my schedule a bit more. And with everything that's going on, I don't think I'm going to do it anymore because it's just not worth it. And that's in the city of College Park, where the University of Maryland is located. And everyone at the University of Maryland is required to be vaccinated. And personally, it's still not worth it for me. And I have a lot of friends who are graduated, and one is going through a really tough spot because she was working remotely for much of the pandemic. She's an engineer, so this isn't a service industry job, but they're fully back in the office, and she's having to listen to anti-vaxxers outside her cubicle chatting with one another about why they won't get the vaccine. And she just feels super unsafe at work. And she's like, I don't know what I'm going to do if they don't let me work from home again because I can't be here.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I definitely don't buy the argument that it's government subsidies. I also think it's very region specific. I've gone to visit my grandpa in New Hampshire twice this summer, which was really lovely after not being able to see him the whole pandemic, especially since he's getting up there in age. And every restaurant and business has help wanted signs out front, which I don't see that much in this area. I think the labor shortage is really getting desperate up there. Like, places just aren't open on Fridays and Saturdays. And it's like, you're a restaurant. How are you not open on a Friday or Saturday? So it's difficult. And I don't think there are any easy answers to it because this situation is not going away easily.
Amy, do you want to add to that before?
Yeah.
I'm just aware of time too. I don't know if there's another session after this.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add my partner is job hunting. She was on medical leave for many years due to a genetic issue that she has, but she's looking to kind of rejoin the workforce and get back at it. You know, and she's not applying for restaurant jobs, but she is applying. One of them is like a librarian aide. One of them is like a local boat rental. You know, and she's like, even these jobs, she's like, I don't understand where people are saying there's a labor shortage, and maybe it's the Bay Area. She's like, but you know, these jobs that I'm applying for, they're telling me that like 200, 300, 400 people are applying for each position. Wow. And I know I've been applying for chief of staff, executive level positions. And I was recently told that one of the applications I sent in was one of like 750 applications. Wow. And I'm like, so you like, I don't understand what people are like.
Right.
There's gaps, you know, and you know, I do think a lot of it is safety. I think a lot of it is, you know, some of the current political environments. My wife has bright purple hair. And so, you know, some people tend to talk down to her sometimes. And she's like, I don't have any interest in going and dealing with the Joe Schmoes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. Yeah. There's so many factors, and how do you even begin, right, to try and do that? I want to be sensitive to time. We've covered a lot here, even with just such a small group. I'm so glad that you guys were open and interested in being active participants in this conversation. Thank you. Any hesitations about sharing this? We did record it. I just want to throw this out here before, and we can edit this part out at the end. But are you guys okay sharing this to the other attendees for? Yep. Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, get on with your day, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you in a future session.
Thank you so much.
Good job.
Take care now. Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
great night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.